She sat beside me close enough to feel every second stretch on. The alarm screamed through the station at exactly 0300 hours, and Katie Morgan jolted awake in her bunk with her heart already racing before her boots hit the cold metal floor. She pulled on her uniform jacket and ran down the corridor toward the command center, where the other night shift officers were already gathering around the main display screen. Something had entered the station's scanning range, and it was coming, in fast and wrong. The trajectory showed a vessel spinning out of control on a collision course with the nearest moon. Lieutenant Amy Brooks looked up from her console with worry creasing her young face and said, "The ship isn't responding to any hails, and life signs are fading fast." Commander Hayes gave the order, and Katie found herself suiting up for emergency retrieval, even though protocol said they should wait for identification first. 20 minutes later, she was guiding her small rescue pod through a debris field of twisted metal and frozen coolant crystals that sparkled like deadly stars in the darkness. The crashed ship had buried itself halfway into the rocky surface, and smoke, or maybe vapor, poured from a crack in the hull. Katie attached her pod to the emergency airlock and forced her way inside with her helmet light cutting through the haze. The interior was like nothing human engineers would design, with walls that curved in impossible angles and control panels that seemed grown rather than built. She found the pilot in what had to be the cockpit, slumped over a crystalline console that pulsed with dying light. The alien was female, or at least Katie thought so, based on the slender build and the way the emergency suit hugged curves that seemed familiar despite everything else being so strange. Her skin was pale blue like winter ice, and her hair fell in silver strands across her face. Katie checked for a pulse and found something beating beneath the ribcage. Strong, but irregular. The alien's eyes opened suddenly, and they were gold like captured sunlight and filled with pain and something else that might have been fear. Katie spoke softly, even though the translator probably wasn't working, and said, "I'm here to help you, and I'm getting you out." The alien tried to speak but coughed instead, and dark purple blood speckled her lips. Katie got her arms under the alien's shoulders and half carried, half dragged her back to the rescue pod. The trip back to the station felt like it took forever, with the alien drifting in and out of consciousness in the seat beside her. Once they docked, Katie got her to the medical bay, where Dr. Lisa Chen was already prepping the quarantine room. The alien was placed on the examination table, and the doctor worked quickly to stabilize her vital signs, while Katie stood outside the transparent barrier and watched. Hours passed, and Katie should have gone back to her quarters to sleep, but something kept her there, watching the alien woman breathe. When morning shift arrived, Commander Hayes called Katie to his office and told her the alien was from a species called the Varesh, who were known as fierce warriors and cold strategists. "They don't feel emotions like we do," Hayes explained, "and they're currently in tense negotiations with the Drex Empire over territorial rights. This could be a spy or a defector, or just someone in the wrong place at the wrong time." Katie was ordered to guard the medical bay and report any attempts at communication. She returned to find the alien awake and sitting up despite Dr. Chen's protests. Their eyes met through the barrier, and Katie felt something shift in her chest, like a door opening that she didn't know was closed. The alien spoke, and this time the translator caught it, rendering her voice into accented but clear English. "You saved my life." Human Katie nodded and said, "My name is Katie Morgan, and you crashed near our station." The alien pressed her hand against the barrier and said, "I am Zira of the Varesh, third daughter of the War Council, and I was fleeing from those who would use me as a weapon." Over the next few days, Katie spent every free moment near the medical bay. Zira's injuries healed faster than human wounds would, and soon she was walking around the quarantine room testing her strength. They talked through the barrier about everything and nothing. Zira described her homeworld with its 3 moons and crystal forests where her people trained for combat from childhood. Katie told her about Earth, about oceans and rain, and the way grass felt under bare feet. Zira listened with an intensity that made Katie feel like every word mattered. "My people believe emotions make us weak," Zira said one night when the station was quiet and most of the crew was sleeping. "We are taught to suppress what you call feelings, to think only of duty and honor and victory." Katie leaned against the barrier and asked, "Do you believe that?" Zira was quiet for a long moment and then said, "I did, until I crashed here, until you risked yourself to save me. No Varesh would have done that for a stranger." Katie smiled and said, "Maybe your people are wrong about emotions, and maybe feeling things is what makes us strong." Zira moved closer to the barrier until they were separated by only a few inches of transparent material. She raised her hand, and Katie raised hers to match it palm to palm with the barrier between them. "I feel something now," Zira whispered, "and I do not have words for it in my language." Katie's heart was beating so hard she thought Zira might hear it, and she said, "Maybe you don't need words." The moment broke when alarms blared again, and Katie ran to the command center to find 3 Drex warships had just dropped out of hyperspace near the station. They were demanding Zira be turned over to them, claiming she had stolen military secrets and was a traitor to the Alliance commander. Hayes looked exhausted and said, "We don't have the firepower to fight them, and diplomatic channels are going nowhere." Katie felt ice in her veins and said, "You can't give her to them and they will kill her." Hayes met her eyes and said, "I don't have a choice, Morgan. And this is bigger than one." Life Katie returned to the medical bay where Zira was standing at the barrier, already knowing what was coming. "They will take me," Zira said calmly. But her eyes betrayed her fear. Katie made a decision in that moment that would probably cost her career and maybe her freedom. She overrode the quarantine lock and opened the barrier Zira stepped through, and they stood face to face for the first time, with no wall between them. Katie took her hand and said, "I'm not letting them take you." They ran through the station toward the docking bay, where Katie's personal shuttle was stored. Alarms followed them, and Katie could hear boots pounding on metal behind them. They made it to the shuttle, and Katie fired up the engines just as security burst through the doors. She punched the launch sequence, and the shuttle shot out into space. The Drex ships immediately locked weapons on them and demanded they return to the station. Katie looked at Zira and said any brilliant warrior ideas right now would be great. Zira smiled for the first time, and it transformed her face, making her look younger and more alive. She reached over and pressed several controls and said, "My ship had one thing intact before it crashed, and a transponder that will call my people." The space around them suddenly rippled, and a massive Varesh warship materialized, its weapons powered up, and the Drex ships backed away quickly. A voice crackled over the comm in Varesh language, and Zira responded. She turned to Katie and said, "They came for me and my sister," leads them relief, flooded through Katie, but also sadness because this meant goodbye. The Varesh ship docked with their shuttle, and Zira stood to leave. She paused at the door and turned back to Katie. "Come with me," she said simply. Katie blinked in surprise and asked what Zira, stepped closer and took both of Katie's hands in hers. "You showed me that emotions are not weakness but strength," she said, "and you risked everything for me when you had no reason to. I want to know more about this feeling, and I want to know more about you." Katie felt tears prick her eyes and said, "Your people won't accept a human." Zira squeezed her hands and said, "Then I will teach them what you taught me." Katie thought about everything she would be leaving behind, and her career and her life on the station and Earth itself. Then she thought about Zira's smile and the way her eyes lit up when they talked, and the warmth she felt when they were together. She said yes. The Varesh ship welcomed them aboard, and Zira's sister was a stern warrior who looked Katie up and down with suspicious golden eyes. But when Zira explained everything, when she told them how Katie had saved her and protected her and shown her a different way of being, her sister's expression softened. "Perhaps humans have something to teach us after all," she said. Katie and Zira stood together on the bridge, watching the stars stream past as the ship jumped to hyperspace. Zira leaned close enough that their shoulders touched. "Thank you," she whispered, "and for showing me what I was missing." Katie smiled and said, "Thank you for letting me find something I didn't know I was looking for." The war between the Varesh and the Drex would eventually end through negotiation rather than bloodshed, and some said it was because one Varesh warrior learned about emotions from a human security officer and taught her people that strength comes in many forms. Katie never regretted her choice. She learned to speak Varesh and trained alongside their warriors and became a bridge between two species, and Zira never lost the warmth that Katie had awakened in her. They explored the galaxy together, discovering that the space between stars was not cold when you had someone beside you, and every night when the ship was quiet, they would stand at the observation window and watch distant suns burn. And Katie would remember that first moment when Zira had opened her eyes after the crash, and how everything had changed because one person chose to care.